Thanks for joining us for this session. I'll just introduce our speakers for today. So first we have Mr. Mitsunobu Koshiba. He's the former chairman of JSR Corporation and the founder of think tank Cdots. Mr. Koshiba joined JSR Corporation in 1981, when it was then known as the Japan Synthetic Rubber Company Limited. There he was engaged in the development of semiconductor materials. In 1990, he was transferred to Silicon Valley, where he worked to establish the semiconductor materials business in the US. He returned to Japan in 2002, was appointed President and Representative Director in 2009, and served as Chairman Emeritus till the end of June 2023. Mr. Koshiba currently serves as a member of government councils on advanced technology, economic security, and innovation strategy. And since 2019, he has served on the Committee on Economic Security and Advanced Technology at the Keizai Doyukai, or the Japan Association of Corporate Executives. We also have with us Ms. Helen Wong, who is Group Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of OCBC. She's currently a council member of the Association of Banks in Singapore and the Institute of Banking and Finance Singapore. Among other things, she serves as a board member at Enterprise Singapore, and she's a member of the Monetary Authority of Singapore Financial Centre Advisory Panel, the MAS Payments Council, and the MAS Financial Sector Tripartite Committee. Ms. Wong has 40 years of banking experience, including vast experience in Greater China, covering a wide range of roles in capital markets, syndicated finance, and corporate banking. So before I invite them to give some opening remarks, just a reminder that you have the QR code that you can scan, and you can submit questions either via Pigeonhole or in person. There'll be roaming mics around later, so just keep some questions in mind. So given the theme of today's topic, I think let's just start with a general overview. I mean, since the pandemic, Southeast Asia has been making a relatively strong recovery, but as we all know, China's growth has been somewhat more disappointing. In your view, what have been the main drivers of recovery in Asia, and how do you see these particular drivers changing or not changing in the year ahead? Maybe if Koshiba-san wants to go first.
Okay. All right, thank you. My name is Mitsunobu Koshiba, and right now I'm kind of retired, but I'm still helping our Japanese government and also a lot of startups in deep tech areas. So it's a great honor, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel, discussion. And really, as I saw the Asian 10 countries, this region has shown resilient growth after COVID, that's for sure. But although that this week, World Bank, warned a significant slowdown that has not been seen since 1960s, which I do not completely agree, because they change forecast every quarter, right? And as a corporate executives, I formulated my long-term strategies through the lenses of geopolitics and market and economy, than technologies, because I'm a very much, strong believer of the long-term cycle. And regarding the resilience of this Asian, region, and even East Asian countries, really after the pandemic, I think that the COVID has little thing to do with really COVID has little thing to do with our growth in a macro scale. And really, there are a few reasons for that. The first one is that the export pressures from China and India get less as their internal economy grew, right? And less electronics, less garments, clothes, coming from China or India into this region. So really, that really gave a room for local Asian economy to grow. And the intra-regional investments here, I think Helen is going to cover much better than I do. they grew from 1.2 trillion US dollars in 2012 to 2.2 trillion US dollars in 2022. So almost doubled. And also the share of the G7 countries used to be 2/3 of the global economies, which really when created in 1986. But now it is down to 44%. The majority of the shift really was brought by Asian countries, including China and Korea, and with those countries nearby. And these regions really enjoy the benefit of economic dividends, coming from really that those kind of economic dividends really started giving prosperities of this region. So that's my assessment. And also, I really like to talk about the decoupling, between U.S. and China. For the sake of discussion following these position talks. So right now, it kind of amazed me, surprised me. Like 25% of iPhones already made in India, right? Shutdown of the iPhone, city in China really freaked out Apple and moved the production to India. Apple started moving the production from China in 2019, starting with the AirPod in Vietnam, and it took them 4 or 5 years before Apple to find alternative suppliers outside of China. This is really amazing fast. Really, I must tell you how difficult to restructure the globally optimized supply chain. But they did it in 4 or 5 years. Even Apple, it took 4 to 5 years. On the other hand, we just saw the announcement of the new Huawei phone having a 7-nanometer node. This is a semiconductor technology. And this chip was made by SMIC, and designed by HiSilicon, which is a subsidiary of Huawei. This fact itself really didn't surprise me, as a matter of fact, because I've lived in the semiconductor industry for 40 years. And, some of the, most of the experts, we know that it's coming. But really that this news really surprised the politicians in the US and also some of the media, people. But really what surprised me and surprised us, who are kind of expert of the semiconductor, market, is that 80%, more than 80% of the semiconductors in the phone was made in China. That really surprised us. So the result of the decoupling of the 7-nanometer device, this one, this device is about 5 years, behind the most advanced TSMC, chips. But that gap is closing. So this is a really great opportunity, for new suppliers in this region, take the part in a growing semiconductor industry in the market. And Malaysia has been has done a good job to lure the significant number of semiconductor-related industries and players. And I think they about more than 20, I would say like 25, 26, companies moved into Malaysia, mainly for the back-end process of the semiconductors. So certainly decoupling is happening, although it was difficult. But really, this gap is closing. And here in Asian regions, there is a good chance for new players coming in this market, just taking advantage of this decoupling. So I like to talk about Japan, because Japan is little known, So, but with, here I'm going to stop. And if I have an opportunity to talk about Japan, that'd be nice later.
Thanks very much, Mr. Koshiba. Helen, if you want to share some thoughts on this opening question about the drivers of recovery and how they've changed.
Yeah, thank you. And it is delightful to be here today, and it's an important topic. And I'm also glad to hear from Toshiba-san about how technology is advancing and how decoupling actually cause or allow business opportunities in this part of the world in particular. So very glad to hear that. What are the trends we're seeing? Obviously, we are a financial institution, and a lot of times we're looking at where the money are moving, and indeed what sort of financial services that customers or companies or SMEs or individuals would require post the pandemic. I think looking forward, I still hold on to the fact that it is a lot of intra-Asia trade and investments. I think the pandemic actually shows governments that it is always good to be doing more with the closer neighbors. And indeed, we have seen ASEAN becoming the largest trade partner for China during the pandemic. And we've seen a lot of investments flow and also trade flows between ASEAN and China, in particular because OCBC has a presence in 6 of the ASEAN countries, which more or less cover 90% of the trade. So we've seen that flow. Yes, China at the moment has not rebounded as quickly as everybody wish it to be. But as we just heard, we continue to see a lot of the manufacturing shifting, I think under the China Plus One strategy to ASEAN. So we talk about Malaysia, but we are seeing a lot of interest of Chinese company going to Indonesia as well. Not so much particularly doing manufacturing. I think Malaysia has been offering, like Vietnam, has been offering a very good destination for China Plus One strategy. It's not just the MNCs, but Chinese companies themselves. They're also setting up in Malaysia. I was in Penang 2 months ago and was talking to the Penang state government and talking about how land has become scarce, not enough to accommodate a lot of the movement, particularly in the semiconductor industry, into Penang. And indeed, we have received a lot of medium-sized, or sometimes you can call them SMEs, but SMEs from China are typically not too small. And they are also looking at opportunity coming into ASEAN. We have, this year since China opening up after the pandemic, we have organized trips to talk to about 500 companies in the Zhejiang and Jiangsu region. They all show interest to look at ASEAN. These are smaller companies. We're working with our partner, Bank of Ningbo, in talking to them. And then a lot of them show interest to establish the supply chain as they follow the MNCs and the Chinese company coming to this part of the world. They want to follow as the supply chain, and they're setting up shop in first stop, obviously Singapore, as their ASEAN headquarters, and then they're looking at other parts in ASEAN. So as we say that maybe some of the manufacturing has left China, but we know that quite a lot is still produced in China. And indeed, China also is changing its attention and focus a lot more on the ESG, right? ESG meaning we all know that China is now the biggest electrical vehicle manufacturer in the world. And for that, they are, of course, trade a lot with ASEAN countries, in particular Indonesia. So I think the future trend has to be continued to be, for us here in particular, what we call the intra-Asia trade and investments flows. And also I need to mention wealth. I think the wealth flow is real, and we all know that the 2 large financial centers, except Tokyo, in Hong Kong and Singapore, is the place where a lot of wealth investments is taking place. And we do see that flow of wealth into Singapore being managed here, and also looking for investments opportunities. And when I say wealth, it's not just individual wealth. It's also about sovereign wealth funds and setting up here to look at very much for a lot of the developed countries. I see the sovereign wealth fund setting up here to look at renewable energy in particular, to invest in the projects, because climate change we all say is real, and all the ASEAN markets are taking a keen interest in to see how to commit to zero or net zero carbon by 2050. Some countries already make that pledge. So I think that is where we will continue to see a lot more investment products coming up, and a lot more sustainable financing coming up to serve both companies and their investors. A last point I want to mention is about digitalization. I think glad to hear about what is happening in the technology field. I'm not in that field. What I can say is we're using technology to help digitalization. And it's actually very, very important because if you look at a bank like ourselves, actually 97% of the financial transactions from our retail customers are now performed digitally. I think that is a very high number. So without the technology, we won't be able to do that. And how to continue to apply that? For example, I think for a bank, as we talk about the wealth flow or money flow across country, the payments scene becomes very, very important. Just want to cite an example. Like recently in August, we have been able to launch for our customers using the OCBC banking app to easily make retail payments to UnionPay QR code merchants in 47 markets around the world. And this is to use the OCBC bank accounts. So you can just use this as you travel. You can scan the UnionPay QR code. And we also have launched and work with Alipay Plus, which is a global cross-border payments marketing solutions by the Ant Group, as people know. And this is also through our OCBC digital app. And in a way, you will be able to pay many, many merchants, stores in the Alipay Plus global ecosystem using, again, the OCBC digital app. And this is already available to our customers when they travel to South Korea, mainland China, and Malaysia. And by the end of the year, this service will be available in Japan, and also in the Hong Kong SAR and Macau SAR. So sounds like I'm doing a little bit of marketing here, which is not the intention, but I'm just trying to say that how technology is important to allow banking to be a much more effective and efficient, and also to allow cross payments or the traveling become easier as well, as I think the sector of hospitalization and also traveling has benefited as we left the pandemic firmly behind us.
Thanks, Helen. Maybe if I could just pick up on the ESG point and invite Mr. Koshiba to give his point of view, because you've got a lot of experience in that area, from my understanding.
Environment?
Environment and sustainability, green technology, and so on.
Yeah, certainly that I closely, follow the environmental issues, and really at Keizai Doyukai, we really study that advance of new technologies, and we have concluded that really this continuous transformation of technology would happen, and certainly that really to achieve the carbon neutral or complete circular economies, you cannot really do it with the extension of the current technologies. And what we've been looking at is that new technologies, we say, I really pay, strong attention to, it's called quantum, technologies. And as you know, that the current AI, particularly generative AI, is not really sustainable because of the energy use. Right? And here, with Japan, we use Japanese language, right? And a number of tokens, if you compare the English and the Japanese, number of tokens would be double or even a quadruple, compared with English tokens, because our language is very, fuzzy. So therefore, really, we do think that the generative AI is, using a conventional semiconductor technologies or high performance, computer. I don't think that is a way to go. But on the other hand, this is quantum technologies. This is a really game changer. And we do think that this technology is going to kick in 2028. Somewhere between 2026 to 2028. This year, there is a significant paper, published by 2 companies in the US to really demonstrate quantum advantages. Meaning that using a classical computer, it may take like a month or a year, but you can use a quantum computer, then you can really calculate within just a matter of 1 week or less than a day. So that is the really that changes we see. But really the quantum, coming back to your question about sustainability, quantum is that you see in the nature, right? You see that migrating bird, they travel like 3,000 kilometers with a little head, right? They do have a magnetic sensor in the little head. They can really sense that a little bit changes in magnetic field, then they can really migrate 3,000 kilometers. And also, you see power of the photosynthesis. I see the backyard, the bamboo shoot, they grow like 1 meter long, just a matter of one day, one night, right? So that really, what it does is to capture the carbon dioxide from ambient, and really, turning carbon dioxide into cellulose, right? And they do at the room temperature. So that is a kind of power of the nature. That is a power of the quantum biology. Right? So therefore, really, coming back to the Asian-specific things, we import a lot of oils, fossil oils, to really for energy, to make a lot of plastics, a lot of fabrics as well. But you can really use it, bacteria, to do the same thing. So really that is a quantum effect in the biology. So really, talking about the future sustainability, what we have to do is to use the power of the quantum technologies. That's what I see in the future. I'm sorry, it's a little bit too long, but I have to really, sell. You did marketing for your company, right? But back in Japan, one of the math scientists, he traveled all over the world to look for, hydrogen bacteria. Hydrogen bacteria eats carbon dioxide and making fuels, making plastics, amazing bacteria, right? And he traveled all over the world to find the best one, but he found in Japan, as a matter of fact. If anybody come to Japan, like Izu, peninsula, and he found that the bacteria at the hot spring of the Izu Island. So really, we are now testing this bacteria to really capture the carbon dioxide, coming from a chemical plant, and converting carbon dioxide into fuel, for airplanes, sustainable aviation fuel, SAF. That's what we are doing. So anyway, that is the power of the biology.
So those would be some examples also of the deep tech that you were talking about in terms of what we should be looking at for future opportunities.
I'm sorry?
So would that be an example of some of the deep tech areas that you're looking at, quantum biology and so on?
Yeah, exactly.
Perhaps, Helen, if you could share a bit more about the very specific investment opportunities in Asia, perhaps also in sustainability, like renewable energy that you mentioned. Are there any other specific investment areas that all these wealth flows are looking at?
I was just can't keep thinking about biotechnology now.
I mean, there could be opportunities for that in Asia as well, presumably in Japan and beyond.
And I think we talk about AI using energy, right? And then we were just saying that, but it is also technology that cause we can now able to use what is in nature. I think that is very, very exciting. So when we say ESG investments, of course, initially a lot of people start to think about energy first, because if you can have more renewable energy to be used, of course, then it helps reduce carbon emission. That is very, very true. And I think for the year 2021, the data shows that China, together with ASEAN, is responsible for one-third, not two-thirds, one-third of the world's emissions, right? So it is important that we continue to create and innovate ways for us to be able to either store carbon more effectively or actually go into ways of working that will reduce carbon emission. And if we can even use carbon dioxide, of course, that is great. So what are the things that ESG investments is keen on? I mentioned renewable energy because I think this is more available at the market. And available meaning that we have seen more developed solar. We have seen more developed, for example, wind farms and even offshore wind farms in Asia. We see it developing in Taiwan, but we're also seeing offshore wind farms developing in Vietnam as well. So that's another. And of course, a lot of our clients telling us that they are looking into other new energy source. May not be so mature yet. We talk about hydrogen, obviously. But having said all that, the way to package this and to finance companies that is looking into this and it's in the supply chain to create renewable energy, this is very important. We always say that the importance is because without financing, a lot of these companies will not be able to do it. So next month, actually COP28 will be held in Dubai, and I think the topic of the financing will be a key feature again. But I think Singapore, particularly in ASEAN, has a very good role to become the center for sustainable financing. And I think banks here, financial institutions here, together with the regulators and the government is looking very keen to build that capability here. I want to mention that in a way, sustainability is still always linked back to technology. It is how we use technology to make things a lot more effective and efficient. And with that, then, it will do away with a lot of processes and things that consume a lot of energy. So when we even talk about AI, for our sector, it's still very important because it does help, for example, as a financial center, managing financial crime risks. This is very important. So AI can, in a way, help us to look at data, and with data, we'll be able to prevent financial crime and also prevent scams, for example. So I think energy reducing carbon emission depends on a lot of innovation and technological innovation, but also with that as an application, again, goes back to the origin to then reduce carbon emission. I think this all go hands in hands together.
Thanks, Helen. So I would like to, they've got some questions coming in, please keep them coming. I think I'll open this one to Koshiba-san. It's basically about going back to this idea of intra-Asia trade, but specifically Japan. So I'll just read it out. Do you see similar trade growth between Japan and ASEAN, the same way that China and ASEAN trade growth has been growing? And why or why not? So especially with this decoupling trend now, is there a way for Japan to kind of take advantage of this? And are there ways that ASEAN can collaborate with Japan?
Yeah, I think really Japan, we are now getting a lot of momentum. And Japan really suffered from deflation. But now that wage increase was like a 3.5%, and minimum wage was increased by 4.5% this month. That really kind of promoted some consumption, and price of the goods really now rising. So really that Japan, first of all, that Also that the compound, nominal GDP growth is like 11%. So Japanese economy is really that kind of picking up now, and which is very important, for us to really that free open trade and free open in the Pacific Ocean initiative, and really taking lead of the CPTPP and the IPEF and others. And RCEP is also important. So really that I think really that without I do think that it is kind of a time of the war. Right? Just a whole like a macro cycle of the geopolitics, geopolitical changes. Saying that it's a time of the war, right? Just like in 1945. And right now that war. A lot of people are talking about the war, classical military conflict, which is the kind of last thing you want to do. So the war would be fought in the form of the economy and technologies. For that, Japan, they really we really have to have a strong economy to counterbalance this. In the middle of the geopolitical, tension right now. So we're just hoping to really that making the relationship with China better, by the way.
But in terms of, say, Japan and ASEAN, do you see it more of like you mentioned, the consumer side of things might be more relevant for links between both countries, as opposed to, say, manufacturing or similar?
Which function?
Between Japan and ASEAN, do you think that it's the consumer demand side of things that might be more relevant?
Consumer? Say again, please.
Sorry. In links between ASEAN and Japan, right?
Yeah.
Economic links. Is it mainly going to be about consumer demand for goods? Or is it going to be higher up in the supply chain?
Yeah, consumer demand, right? Yeah, right. I don't know. Right now that we see a lot of negative signs, like China and US. Right? So therefore, I think in the short term, I don't know. It's very difficult time to foresee in the future right now. But generally speaking, certainly that global economy would be like a U.S., EU, China, and India. India, global South, and here this region is also again that we get some economic dividends. And eventually that, I think consumer demand is going to really pick up in the long term.
Maybe Helen, if you can share what OCBC clients in Asia are thinking about. Are they looking at Japan, and if so, in what kind of specific areas?
I think once for sure, Japan must be the most popular destination for Singaporeans to spend as a consumer. I think we have seen perhaps for the past 10 years, more flows from China, definitely, even from Taiwan, but with Japan, the growth catching up, I think there will be more opportunity. Japan has always, in a way, a destination for some of our customers to look at real estate, but real estate not so much as definitely like commercial real estate. For example, data center. I think data center is one thing that is very important, and it is in huge demand as technology becomes ever more important as a driving force of business. So I do see opportunities also for Japanese large corporates coming to this part of the world. There has been long invested manufacturing, for example, in Vietnam by Japanese companies that we have seen. But again, I think Japanese companies may also be looking at Indonesia. I think Indonesia is the next big consumer market for everyone in Asia. So potentially there will be perhaps more flow on that as well.
Okay. I think so as not to give Pigeonhole too much of a monopoly. If there are any questions from the floor that I could take, if anyone's interested in asking. Table 30, thank you.
Hi. Thanks, Ignatius from Shell. Of course, we are also in green. Of course, traditionally, we're still a very oil and gas company. But I heard a lot of green discussion in this panel. So going green, green tech, and seems like it is going to be the next growth engine, not just for Asia, but also for the world. But yesterday, we also talked about energy securities. We also talked about the contextual risks around geopolitics. So my question is, how do you see these two will reconcile in terms of energy securities of a country needs and the energy transition that they have permitted? And what are the challenges that you see from the investment and financial perspective that when come to the decision framing, how that pan out? Thank you.
I don't know if you'd like to take this question first. So it's basically about the tension between countries having to worry about their energy security, but also make the green energy transition and how they navigate that.
Yeah, Japan, our self-sufficiency of energy is just only 12%. Right? So certainly that we import a lot of fossil oils and LNG from Gulf states and partly from coming from the U.S. right now. Certainly that the Japanese government trying to diversify the supply chain. But really the thing is that, again, really coming back to the use of the computational power to make biology more effective. Really, as I told you, power of the bacteria is very high. So if you can use this hydrogen bacteria to circulate carbon dioxide, but also other bacteria to make plastics, really one of the companies I'm helping is a company called Spiber, and 2 students from a college. They captured more than 1,000 species of a spider to analyze, gene expression, and the structure of a spider silk, and really that measure the properties of a spider silk. So really that using bioinformatics, you can really design that gene in a bacteria. You can really make almost anything, right? So really that instead of using synthetic fiber, we can use acrylic, protein fiber to really that make your clothes, right? So really no issue of the microfiber, and also at the same time you can use fermentation to break your fabrics into glucose, which would be a feed for another feed for bacteria. Then you really literally, you can use this kind of paper to make a very expensive sweater, almost like a cashmere type of sweater, right? So really, that's what the bacteria can do, and that's what the nature can do. So certainly it's going to take a long time, but these kind of things, really, energy transition is quite important. But again, that it doesn't really do everything. So you really have to use a renewable and a lot of really energy policy to mix every different technologies, and then using the power of a computation, you can really design your gene and then design your bacteria to make to modify that to make real bacteria for your given to really manufacture your given products. So I don't know. It sounds like a dream, but it's going to happen.
Yes, I guess cutting down conventional energy use is part of this.
I must say this is really part of it. Thank you for the question. I think we always say this is a big question, right, for Asia, and particular ASEAN countries. When we talk about transition into net zero, it's a long journey. But you think about it, it's not that long. We talk about a lot of countries committing net zero by 2050. So another 20-something years. So it's not that long a journey. But of course, it is a challenge for Asia in particular, because we have to balance that. What we call, when you try to have these ambitious decarbonization goals, it has to be balanced with what we call a fair transition. So it is a journey, but this journey has to be committed. That's why we keep talking about it, because without the commitment, it will never happen. But the commitment has to come from all fronts, right? One is further technology innovation. And if we can use nature, use bacteria, that would be great as another form of saving energy, if not generating energy. But again, I think when we said we have to all to come together, for us in the financial sector, of course, we're talking about how do we help companies to decarbonize and to how to transition. The financing has to come into place, but when you talk about financing, we also talk about there's always, for example, political risk, lending into a project into a country that may not be that politically stable and all this. So a lot of this would have to come with a sort of like a global effort. What I'm saying is we need to be able to standardize a lot of the ESG definitions. We have to be able to capture the same thing, the frameworks, what is available, what is transparent, so that when we say we have to look at ESG as a way that can, some of the political factors can be overcome. Meaning if we all come together and say that this is special because this is non-negotiable, because otherwise we cannot battle with climate change. So a lot of different parties, governments will have to come together to say that this is the way we treat ESG, this is the way we generate the financing that is required, this is the way we, through data, through transparency, through disclosure, that we're able to arrange the right financing for companies to improve, continue to innovate, to use more renewable energy, and to help the economy to transition. It's definitely a journey, and it is sometimes a very delicate balance. But I think that is exactly what everyone has to commit to do.
I think kind of going back to the political point that Ignatius was making about national energy security, and also your point about investments in renewable energy projects and so on in other countries, do you think there's a tension there in terms of where a country decides to invest in, say, energy projects when they then do, energy imports and so on? Is there this political concern when we think about energy security and investment?
I think this always exists. When you have country, you have politics, and then you always talk about national security. That's why I just mentioned COP28. I mean, it's the 28th times people come and meet together, take perhaps 25 of that to come up with the Paris Agreement. And of course, the pandemic caused the Paris Agreement to a little bit like, hey, it's not moving as fast as everybody has hoped. But again, I'm not saying there's any easy solution. But if government and government are not talking and agree that more working together can hopefully create a better solution, then there's nothing more we can do. But of course, we have to continue to look at security of energy, right? That's what every country will look at. But again, I'm saying that there has to be more dialogue, there has to be more investments, there has to be more ways to find a solution as we go on this journey together.
I hope that answers your question. Oh, if you would like to do a follow-up, if we could send the mic again to our friend Ignatius. Oh, it's good. Okay. Any other questions from the floor? If we have no questions from the floor, I'll take another one from Pigeonhole. So this is a question about ASEAN growth again. We're in Singapore, and I think it's quite expected. But the question is, to what extent do you believe in the idea of ASEAN growth? It's 10 very different markets, very different languages, very different stages, and so on. How meaningful is it to talk about, ASEAN growth in that way?
I'm not a ASEAN, expert, but because as a corporate, executive, it's a very difficult market, right? Because as a whole, certainly it's got economy, and there is a growth. As I said, certainly that there is a really structural change in economies, as India and China grow, and export pressure is already, it's getting less and less, here. So there are a lot of things, ASEAN 10 countries can do. But really looking at the individual countries, it's very difficult for us to understand. Really depending upon what kind of issues you have with China, maritime issue or territorial issue, really, and also the structure of the politics. It's a very, very difficult, different from one country to the other. So therefore, really, we need to understand more about the ASEAN market. But my experience is that, we decided to invest in Thailand. And I had a very good experience with Thailand. And also that one of the companies I've been helping, they really invest heavily in Vietnam, and they really have a hard time right now. So therefore, kind of looking at all the precedent cases, some of the countries, it's nice, it's easy to do business, but some of the countries, it's so difficult to do businesses. Really looking at the politics and geopolitics and all the constraints, and there are a lot of things we really have to understand before we invest in ASEAN. And Singapore is certainly it's a safer bet as well.
Helen, maybe what's your point of view? Are people looking at ASEAN as ASEAN, or are they looking at the individual countries like Mr. Koshiba said?
I think it's actually both. When I say both, it means that people are looking ASEAN as a overall community that have a big population. It's an important market in the world. And when we talk about trade, a lot of things is interlinked. And of course, the 10 countries are very different. Rules, regulations, laws, culture, they're different. But you can sometimes say that even though this is all different, there's always the wish to grow. The wish to grow and the wish to accumulate wealth, a wish to reach middle income or even better. So I think that is something that is common. But even when we say, hey, then they are different countries, right? Yeah, they are, but they're also quite linked together. For example, they will negotiate trade agreements together, right? They would want to, I think trade is forever important for any country. So that's one part. And then economic growth is about how do you bring all the services together and whether you attract FDI also into the countries as well. And I think these 10 countries, they're all different, but if you say that there is always an ASEAN strategy for some of the MNCs. The ASEAN strategy perhaps would be quite simple to say that I have Singapore as the trading office or the financial center where I actually can recruit talents and to manage. And then I can have 2 factories, one in Malaysia, one in Vietnam. The products can be sold to the Western market, to US, but equally can be sold in this region. It can plug back into manufacturing into China. And then even when we say that if the Taiwanese company are now coming more because they are a lot in the semiconductor, they're going to Malaysia. But doesn't mean that some of the wealth is not coming onto Singapore to be managed here. You see the number of family offices being set up. You see even last year where it has been a very difficult market for investments for wealth, we continue to see for our bank, together with our Bank of Singapore, we continue to see some net new flows of 25 billion Sing dollars into just our network. So you see that happening, and in a way, when you say we are investing in Indonesia, you're also seeing the Indonesians trying to establish a connection for their trade. And when they sell the commodities to China. They are also continue to bring this wealth to be managed and to invest in other things, and thinking and talking a lot more about renewable going forward. So I think the market is interlinked. The important thing is which part of these 10 countries where a foreign investment would consider is the best for it. But equally, perhaps the first step should come to Singapore. Definitely there will be enough opportunity identified here as the financial center for any investors.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to tell is that, being Japanese, looking at this, Asian, the market. And one thing which is very unique, not from us, but, all the business tycoons, in these regions. Now that you got the new generations, all of them, they are educated in the US or, UK. And very, kind of from me, I kind of see the sign of the business practice really kind of changing, or even the business model, changing in the Asian market, which is very attractive. And it's a very also mysterious, what's going to happen. So if you have any thoughts on this, let me know. How the business tycoons in this region, they're gonna, change from generation to generation. Do you see any changes right now?
I feel like if we're talking about the culture of business tycoons, actually OCBC might probably have a lot of insight into, your new wealth clients and so on, whether you see them.
I think that can be a separate conversation.
Oh, okay.
Outside of the forum.
Right. Best to meet them yourself. I guess since we're talking about this idea of the ASEAN strategy and so on, we'll just go back to geopolitical uncertainty again. So besides the very huge issue of US-China decoupling, do you see any other geopolitical issues that might arise? Or is that really going to be the big theme for the next few years in terms of how geopolitics affects economic development?
We're talking about Cdots, we are a think tank. We are looking at kind of long-term trend. And looking at the long-term trend through the market, through the eyes of the, hedge fund, Ray Dalio in the U.S. He's the biggest hedge fund guy, and he really analyzed the past 500 years how the hegemony, changed from Dutch, British, Americans, and right? So really, there is like 80-year cycle. And also that cycle is supported by technology. And that Dutch, they are good at making the ships, right? And Great Britain, they really enjoy the benefit of the industrial revolution. And also that US has two unique long-term cycles, 80 years and 50 years. Every 80 years, it is called institutional cycle, which really happened in 1945. And this is the 80th year is coming soon. And also there is another cycle called social economic cycle of 50 years. So every 50 years, really, the new cycle, takes place. So right now that in US, both cycles, coming to the downturn simultaneously for the first, for the first time of the history of the US. So really the thing is that, certainly talking about the geopolitical tensions, really, I think macroscopically, the global order changes right now. So this decade is really the decade for the transition. But the other, the other side is that the new cycle is going to happen. It's going to start, maybe toward the end of this century. This decade. So therefore, I'm really saying that we really don't assume, this kind of situation is going to, is going to continue forever. Most likely, this kind of bust cycle is going to end in the end of this decade. So then again, that new cycle, is gonna really start. So really, during the World War II, right, a lot of people, with a lot of pressure, geopolitical, pressure, a lot of people kind of, working on the new technologies. That time, that nuclear and the computer, right? So then, during the Cold War, between the U.S. and Soviet Union, and that after the Cold War is over, what we got is the GPS and the internet, right? So therefore, this is a particular decade. You see a lot of new technologies really that are, being developed underground. And eventually, once this tension is over, this new technology is going to bring in a new revolution, innovation. And I don't know what it is, but certainly, eventually, we're going to come to the new prosperity will be coming. Maybe next 2030, 2040. That's what we should prepare as well.
Sounds exciting and a bit ominous at the same time. Helen, if you have any thoughts on, say, whether it's about the geopolitical influences in the near term or in longer term growth trends for the region and what we should be looking at?
I think geopolitics is not new. The risk is always there for any business, for anyone. It's all about the nimbleness, whether you identify different opportunities. We are financial institutions. The ultimate importance, I think, to us as we serve a lot of our customers is really about economic growth. So I wouldn't say, of course, geopolitics will impact economic growth. And we've already seen the geopolitical tensions around the world has impact, for example, the supply chain in Asia even, right? But I hope that, when we say because we serve millions of customers, so in a way when we come back to just say an ordinary person, what do we want to do or what do we want to see? We're still living a life, we're still wanting to grow so that we leave something for the next generation. So that, all the practical questions the everyday will come back in. So for me in particular, I always think about how to improve livelihood, rather, right? Instead of thinking so much. We always consider geopolitical risk and tension. We are perhaps a bit more lucky in this part of the world at the moment. But we already see how ASEAN adjusts and how ASEAN continue to work with China or other countries in Asia. But again, it always come back to, if you ask government, it always come back to the point that, do I grow fast enough to feed my people? Do I grow fast enough to provide employment for the young graduates? Do I grow fast enough to make sure that there is no unrest, political unrest inside the country? I think these are probably more burning issues. And other burning issues is, what are we facing going forward in the next 20, 30 years? We talk about aging already for a lot of Asian countries. Aging is a problem. And if you couple that with climate change, impact of climate change, then these are more burning issues. So I hope, coming back to businesses, we're really always thinking about a day-to-day livelihood of people. How do we serve them better? And meanwhile, of course, have a keen eye watching what geopolitical tension would be. But I have a strong belief, I'm Asian, and I have a strong belief that Asians tend to be sometimes a bit more practical. Also thinking about how to resolve things, how to make our life better, how to accumulate wealth. I think more than fighting, and I hope that stays.
I guess it sounds...
One more. Really the things that, as I said, this is really time of uncertainties. And really that, future is not very clear. And geopolitically, anything can happen right now, right? So therefore, my advice to the corporate management in Japan is that, it is a time for us to increase the number of options. Number of options meaning that using your money on your balance sheet, invest into the kind of future things. And really don't make up the decision quickly. Later the decision you make, better decision you make. Right? So therefore, this is not really time to, in a hurry, this is not really time to really make a critical decision in a hurry. Later, just postpone the decision as much as long as possible. And you can do it if you have enough options. So anyway.
That's in terms of, say, staying open to new areas you can go into, that sort of thing, new opportunities.
Yeah.
In that sense.
Yeah, you don't know what's going to be your opportunity. So that's why you create options, right? So
from Helen, it sounds as though, despite all this uncertainty, you do think businesses will still be keen on basically going ahead, not taking too much of a wait-and-see approach?
There is only so little time to be waiting and seeing, right? Because if you don't move on, then you're falling behind. So I guess growth is still imminent. We're not saying that there is no growth in Asia. We have been seeing Asian countries, ASEAN in particular, rebounding very well from COVID. And going forward, yes, we hope that China, being a very big engine in this part of the world, would rebound quicker. But we're still predicting growth in China, right? So we're not saying that there is no growth. And when there's a hope of growth, and I think we all need it, then people should focus on where is the opportunities for growth. And then, like Koshiba-san say, that you have options and be agile, right, when the opportunity comes. I do want to add on to that. That's why talents is a very, very important issue for any organization. You have the best people, then you capture the opportunities. That's one thing, I think in particular when we are waiting and seeing, the best thing is to reflect on whether we have really the people who are strong enough to take us to the next stage.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll do perhaps one final sweep of the floor for any questions that have arisen in the last few minutes. Oh, yes, please.
Thank you. Just to follow up the options, we haven't talked much about the connection with areas outside Asia, right? Koshiba-san was talking about free and open Indo-Pacific, where the importance of Africa has been emphasized. So what are you going to get connected? How you are going to get connected to countries like African countries, or like PGII, which India and the United States proposed in G20. How would you like to make use of that, going through India, going through Middle East, to be connected to Europe? So there are two new opportunities open in front of you. So how are you going to make use of it?
The question about going beyond Asia, looking at opportunities in other continents. Either of you would like to go?
Yeah. Really depending upon what business you do, right? So here, at the JSR, my former company, we do a high tech, deep tech. So that's why that our main focus has been US and Europe. And really that we like to invest a lot of money. For that, we really have to go to the area where that we can really get some feel comfortable with the geopolitical stabilities. Certainly that in the case that India and Africa is a second priority, or even a third priority to us. But really the thing is that other companies, like consumable companies and very healthcare companies, they really certainly they need to go to Africa, and Japan is really behind. So Keizai Doikai recently, formulated a group of initiative, going more into Africa and doing some philanthropy in a type work, and also that social contribution to get recognized. And we even formulated a fund to really foster the startups in Asia, Africa. So that kind of move is kind of starting slowly in Japan right now. But certainly that if I get asked about how we're going to do with African countries, certainly that Japan is kind of behind, the most behind. Maybe like Koreans, they are very aggressive, right? But the Japanese, are not that aggressive, so we are a little bit behind, I must say.
It is a very good question, thank you. I'm thinking more about the first response is about which company, which industry are we talking about, and what these new markets or newer markets can offer to them. Can't speak for many of the customers we support, but of course, from Singapore, for example, or from this part of the world, it's never short of investments going into the Western, the advanced markets. I mentioned different types of investments before I talk about data center. But again, there is always strong interest to go to the bigger cities and invest in real estate. I mean, you simply put, for example, I think student accommodation in the American market, in the UK market, is a very strong, attracting a lot of investments from this part of the world. But putting that aside, of course, there's always interest in what are the infrastructure projects. Some of our big customers, like construction company, or companies that is focusing a lot more in the sustainability, like designer of smart cities or whatever. I think there will always be opportunities for these to consider the less developed markets. But a lot of these have to have quite a bit of government-to-government agreement and government working first before the companies can go ahead. So the last point I may want to mention is for us, again, financial institutions, we look at money, how money flows around the world. So when I say in Asia, definitely Singapore, Hong Kong are two financial centers that capture a lot of the wealth and the investments. We're seeing that actually the Middle East through the UAE, Dubai in particular, would be another channel, which certainly is linking up some of the wealth in Europe and then channeling that across to Asia as well. So I think on wealth, I always look at three centers rather than just two. But investments would be a lot going into the developed markets, while the other big cities. But if we're talking about manufacturing technology, then of course, or even when we talk about biotechnology or talking about basic infrastructure, I think Africa continues to open up that opportunity. But it's not something that is so easy for any company to say that I know how to go into Africa.
Yeah.
Thanks. So we're running out of time, but I think I'll just invite both speakers, perhaps go back to our topic of the day, which is seizing the next bound of growth in Asia. Maybe just if you have one very specific point you want to make about how companies should think about seizing the next bound of growth, if you could just sum it up in one quick point.
Okay.
How would you do that?
You caught me off guard. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, really the thing is that, certainly that this type of the geopolitical situation is going to continue, right? So now that the global market will not be divided between two, meaning that China and the US. So it would be really full part of the world, US, EU, and China, and Global South. India, right? So really, this part of the world is really that kind of in between. So meaning that we got to be clever, right? And really, the thing is that during the time of this kind of age of the uncertainties, most important thing for government and any corporates is really that how much of an intelligence you have. Really that creating an intelligence within your corporation is so important. And that really applies to anybody in this region. So we really have to understand that how geopolitical balance really changes. Don't really extrapolate today's situation, to the future. So really that brush up your intelligence, really study carefully, and create options, and eventually, this area of globe is going to flourish and capture that opportunity. That's all I can say.
Thanks very much. Helen,
I totally agree with Koshiba-san on capturing opportunities, creating options. Right? Creating options, that's very important. But I think uncertainties is always there. Geopolitical tensions will not be there, sorry. Yeah. and in a way, but they also change according to, a long time. I think there are only two things that going into medium, longer term will not disappear, will not change, sorry. It's a bit complicated what I'm trying to say. There are two things which I see will always be there that we need to be putting our attention on. The first thing is the development, the advancement of technology. We simply call it transformation, digitalization. This will not change. It will be even faster. So how to make sure that we follow that and we are able to use it? No matter what business you are in, it's something you cannot miss. So this will not change. You have to focus on it and making sure that we're not falling behind. The second thing that would not change is climate change is already there. This will not be better. It will only be worse if we don't do things about it. And for long-term survival of the planet, of people, of the business, to be sustainable, we really all have to commit on that, because this will not be reversed. It's irreversible. So to me, as a business person, I always look at these two. And then, of course, making sure that our people are together. We are seeing that too. And so have the right people to deal with all the uncertainty and capture and take the options and capture the opportunities.
Well, on that note, I think it's a good time to thank both of you for being here and sharing your views.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.